Welcome back to my studio. My name is Monica, and it is World Watercolor Month. So I thought it would be really fun to bring you some little exercises that you can do, especially if you're a beginner. I did not want to come on here and show you how I swatch colors. I mean, I feel like that's something you can do on your own. And I'm not a huge fan of color mixing charts and I guess you would say like brush skills drills where you repeatedly do the same thing over and over. Does it does it help? Yes, it absolutely does help. Practice makes perfect. But I also think it can get a little bit boring and a little bit tedious. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between doing something repetitively and then actually applying those skills to a painting. You have to kind of know how it all works together. And I think the most effective way to do that is to actually paint. And how much fun is it to paint something small? You're still practicing all of your skills, but you have something when you're finished. So I'm going to be doing these types of videos over the course of this month so that you can take these and run with them and practice on your own. So, today I wanted to talk a little bit about value, and you can easily see value when you take a photograph and turn it into a black and white photograph, which you can do on your phone by applying an effect. And it really helps you to see the value levels. And that is what helps to create depth in a painting. And that's what we're going to be talking about and working with today. You don't have to have a correct color in order for a painting to look correct. And what I mean by that is if I were to show you something like this is all monochromatic. So it's one color that I've used, and they're just different values of the same color. So you can still create an effective painting that reads correctly just by shifting your values. So that's what we're going to do. And I think the easiest way, like I said, to learn how to do something is by actually doing it. You could paint, do a value scale, but to me, it doesn't, how do I translate that into a painting then? So I'm going to grab my tape and you can pick whatever shape you want to do this in. Um, Circles are really fun, and you can also do a square or a rectangle. Um, but I think today I'm going to do a couple of circles. And the paintings that I just showed you, these are just little paintings. I pulled these out of my head. If you need something to look at while you're painting, go on to Unsplash, but try to pick something that's relatively simple or simplify it yourself. So maybe the photograph has a picture of, an ocean and some boats and trees, and you can just simplify it, take all the boats out, just paint the sky, the mountains, and the water and leave it at that. It'll be really good practice and you'll see what I mean. So I've got my little palette here that I love so much. And I have filled it with Daniel Smith paint. And I think I'm actually going to clean part of this off so we can use a color we wouldn't normally use when you're looking at a landscape, just so that you can get the idea. So I am going to use a relatively big brush because it's a size 8 on these little circles, and it just helps me stay away from trying to get too fiddly and too detailed. So you could use a 6 or an 8 on a circle. This is probably a 3-inch circle. And the paper that I'm using is Arches Cold Press, and it is really good paper. It's 100% cotton. And I had made myself a sketchbook. I used, so this was some material that I designed. Um, and I purchased a sample of it on Spoonflower. So This is the canvas version, and then this is the regular cotton. And I have done this fabric in a couple of different colorways. So, what I did is I wanted to make myself a journal with the paper that I loved and at the size that I wanted. And unfortunately, I glued the binding and I did not use a bookbinding glue, and I knew it would probably be a problem. And it was because the whole thing fell out. So, I have this stack of paper that's all cut I think it's like 5 inch, 5, 6 inch squares. And that's what I'm going to be using. And I'll be using that over the course of the month when we're doing these exercises. So the first color I'm going to pick up something that's, like I said, it's not something we normally would think of. I'm going to use orange. So you can do this too. I would suggest not picking a color like yellow because yellow is already so light in value. So try to pick something that's mid value like orange, or you can even pick a dark color like a dark gray or a dark blue or purple, because you can lighten the value with your water. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I'm going to pick a landscape that is relatively straightforward. So I'm going to do a sky. I'm going to add in some mountains, and there will be some trees and water in the foreground. So I'm going to start with my orange, and I'm going to get a pretty good puddle going here. And if you want to test out your paint and see what it looks like, what value it is, and it's always going to dry lighter because this is watercolor. And once the water evaporates, you're going to be left with a lighter version of this. So um, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to load my brush up, and it's full of paint and water. And I'm not going to dry it off. I'm just going to go right in here and keep my brush full and go ahead and start laying in paint. And if a square is a little bit easier for you to work in, then by all means do that. And when I get about here, I'm going to rinse my brush off in the water and kind of tap it off a little bit on my paper towel so I don't have an extreme amount of water pushing back up into the paint that we already have. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more water, and I'm just going to wet this whole bottom section. I just want to bring some of that color down here. So I'm going to go back into my orange. I might add a little bit more pigment to this puddle. And skies are always darker at the top. So I'm going to add a little bit more pigment in there. Yeah. And I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Rinse off my brush, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to swipe at the bottom with a little bit of water on my brush and just kind of bring it down. Now, if I want to add some clouds, you can very easily dry your brush off, and you can start lifting out the pigment with your brush, and you can create some wispy little clouds going on. And you can also use some Kleenex, or rip off a little piece of your paper towel and just start lifting out some cloud shapes, and try to vary the way that you're holding the paper towel. you don't want the same you don't want the same shapes over and over like that. So try and vary the way that you're holding it. And if you don't like something, you can take your damp brush and you can just push the paint to cover some areas. So I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to move on to this circle down here, and I'm going to pick a different landscape. Maybe we can do something that's a little bit just a little bit more simplified. Maybe like a beach scene. And we can do our beach scene in, let's do our beach scene in purple. Why not? So I need to actually uh, make some space over here for the purple that I just splattered all over the place from my brush. Okay, so I'm going to make myself a nice puddle of purple, and I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, except this time when I'm going in with my purple, I'm going to skip some areas, and I'm going to make sure that I have a lot of water and a lot of pigment on my brush. And I'm going to get that initial top part of the sky, and then I'm going to start skipping around. And that didn't quite work the way that I wanted it to. My studio is extremely dry. I have fans going up here normally because it gets hot in the summertime. So I'm just going to do the same thing I did up here, and then we'll pull out some cloud shapes. I'm just going to pull this color all the way down. And I'm going to go back in at the top, and I'm going to add, it's actually more paint than water that I have on my brush. I'll rinse it out and tap it off so I don't have an enormous amount of water, just so that I can spread this paint around where I want it. Something like that. So same thing. I'm just going to go in here and lift out a couple of little fluffy clouds. And every time you go in here with your brush to lift out pigment, wipe it off. And this is a great way to also determine what stage of wetness your painting is in. So when I go in here and lift out the watercolor, if it's too wet, it will just fill right back in. So you might have to wait a second and then try it again. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And let me check and see if this is dry. I'm going to hit that with the heat gun real quick. Okay, that's pretty good. And I'm going to go back up and look at the reference photo that I had. And I've got some mountains in here, and you can see that my horizon line is tilted at an angle. And I'm not going to bother going in and fixing that because I already know I'm going to have some mountains that are going to be covering that up. So I'll go back into my orange, and the mountains, because they're in the distance, um, they're going to be fairly light, but they need to be, they're going to be darker than this. Once I layer another pass of watercolor on top of this, it's automatically going to be darker than the sky, but I still want them to be light. So I'm just going to go here and make some rocky kind of shapes. And then I'm going to rinse my brush off. I need to fill this in a little bit. And I am going to run this along the bottom edge of these mountains because I don't want this bottom edge to dry with a hard line. I want these to be kind of softened out. I'm going to add just a little bit more pigment up to the edge, the top of this one. And I think I want to define a couple more little rocky shapes in this one. Okay, so we're going to have to let that dry before we do anything else with that one. And I don't like this shape right here, so I am going to change this by dropping in a little bit more pigment there. And you can see that I had too much water on my brush, so this created this kind of back run right here, which is fine. It adds a little bit of texture, and these are little landscapes, so it really doesn't, I guess it doesn't matter, is what I'm trying to say. And this is just practice, and this is just fun. And what's nice about this is you only need one color. So for this one, I'm going to go back into my purple, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of a darker, I think I accidentally picked up a different color. Okay. So I think that I'm going to drop in something that's going to be like a little bit of land, trees, or I don't know what's going on over here, but something. And I am going to drag that right across. I'm going to take my brush. Now that I have this line, I'm going to rinse it out, tap it off a little bit, and go right along the edge and soften all of that out. I can pick up a little bit more water, tap my brush off, go in here, and just get this all smoothed out. And if you want to, you can dry your brush off and um, add a couple of little, um, if your paint is still wet, you can lift out some of this to give a little bit of a water reflection feel here. Okay, so that has to dry. And I'm going to hit both of these with the heat gun, and then we'll finish these off. Okay, so this is dry. I'm going to pick up a little bit more orange. And I'm going to do a line of trees. And I'm just going to start with some basic line shapes. And I'm going to have these just kind of following a curve. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the mountain. I'm going to blur out or soften out that bottom edge. So I'll rinse my brush off, get rid of the excess water, and just drag it along the bottom. And since these are in the distance, don't worry about, trying to detail these out at all. I think if you get a basic shape um, for the trees, it's fine and it will read correctly. So for this one down here, we could really just add something in the foreground and call it good. I mean, this is about as simple as it gets. And the pigment that you want in the foreground, you want it to be your darkest value. So I could do something. I could do something like some grasses coming up just by flicking my brush, and I can hold it sideways just to lay in some darker, broader areas right here. And then just hold the brush at the end, and with a flicking motion, you can pull up some grasses. And just make sure that you're varying the direction, because we all know grass doesn't grow in a straight line unless we're mowing it. So something as simple as that, and you have a landscape and you did it all in one color, and it's really great practice for your values. So if we go back to this one, I'm not sure if I'm going to leave an area for water. I think I'm just going to add another layer of trees here, and maybe this to me already kind of looks a little bit like water because of the way the paint ran. So maybe we'll keep that as water. I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to go back into my orange, and I'm going to get a pretty um, little bit of a thicker consistency, I guess, that has more paint in it than water, and load my brush up. And for the trees that are closer to us, I'm actually going to leave some of this fuzzed out lighter value down here so that it looks a little bit like a mist, and it's not completely dry. So I'm going to dry this real quick. Okay. And the trees that are in the foreground, I do want those to be a little bit more detailed. Not by much, but make sure that you've got a pretty heavy pigment load in your brush, and you can just start kind of tapping back and forth and put in some these are a little bit abstract tree shapes, I guess. And like I said, I wanted to leave some of this lighter value here that kind of reads like a little bit of a mist. And um, you can make some random shapes like bushes, and um, I always feel very Bob Ross when I'm doing something like this, because it could be anything, right? Just happy little shapes. That's what I think of. So we don't know what it is. Something, something that's living back here. Okay. So I do want to fuzz out this bottom part as well, just because I don't really ever like a hard line there. Even if I go in front of it with something dark, I still like to have that soft edge. Okay. And I think I don't really have enough room right here for it to read as water. So I think I'll just fill this in with a darker value again, and I'll pull up some little detail shapes. So for this one, we can go in here and add a couple of little details, um, just to finish it off. And I think I would like to add a couple of little birds in the sky, and maybe one more because I don't like um, even numbers. Odd numbers are a little bit more interesting. And you could even add a boat or something in here. I feel like I need a smaller brush to do that. Let's see. Maybe we can add something way back here. It's a pretty simplistic boat. And maybe we can add a little bit of a reflection or something like that. And I'm going to hit that with the dryer one more time and we'll finish that one off. So again, I'm going in with a lot of pigment in the foreground, and maybe I will just add, let's see what we can do here. Maybe add just some random bushes, or I really don't know. I'll just pull up some little grassy bits and kind of fill this area in. I think I'm going to use my brush and pull out a little bit of the paint just so that maybe it reads like a meadow here in the front. And I want a little bit of texture. I don't want it to be one solid blob of color. So I'm just using a really dry brush and kind of pulling up to create some little textures in here. And I think I can do the same thing and I'm going to add a bird in here. And you can do that with the tip of your brush. It doesn't really matter how big your brush is. Hold it perpendicular to the paper, and you should get a pretty good point. And maybe we can add some indications of something growing here. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it for these two. Give these a try. If it's easier for you to work in a rectangle, then definitely do that. But just be mindful when you're laying your paint down, um, how your values are working. And these could have been a little bit better if I had maybe slowed down a little bit. But this is really, really good practice, and this is a practical way for you to build your value skills and being able to see value and how it works when you're actually painting something. So these are the types of exercises that I'm going to be bringing you for this World Watercolor Month here in July. And we'll be focusing on things like texture and wet in wet. We'll also be doing some embellishments and also some effects like, dropping water in and maybe a little bit of alcohol or salt, fun stuff. And there'll be practical exercises so that you'll know exactly how to apply these when you're painting. And I think that's about it. But I hope you join me for the rest of this month. This was a lot of fun. I'm going to keep these short and sweet so you can refer back to these time and again. And if you liked this lesson, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll be alerted whenever a new video drops. I'm trying to release these once a week. I might do a couple of little extra ones here and there this month. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, give this a thumbs up if you like it. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to drop me a comment. I love chatting with everybody here, and I will see you very soon. Take care.